Perfect. Thank you very much, Steve. Appreciate it. Great to be here. Maya Angelou had a great line. She said, you can tell a lot about a person by the way she handles three things. Three things: a rainy day, lost luggage, and tangled Christmas tree lights. I think today she'd probably add unmuted microphones to that. So emotional intelligence, my wife loves to ask me. I've had the chance to travel all around the world speaking, not for the last few months. I've just kind of sat in my house, finishing up two books at the same time. I find that that's how I'm wired. I write two things simultaneously better than one. But my wife loves to ask me when I'm traveling, what are you speaking on today? And when I tell her this topic, emotional intelligence, Dominica loves to ask me this. She says, honey, can you become more emotionally intelligent? And I think she's picking on me. I'm not sure. I spent a year with the leadership development program of all execs, all C-suite execs in Texas. This is about 2 years ago. I spent a year with them. I saw them 4 full days throughout the year just on this topic alone. And at one point, I think it was the second full day session with them, somebody said, Jonathan, what's your EQ? Like when you take assessments and scores, what's your EQ? And I was sort of laughing and smiling. And I said, well, it depends. And the person said, what do you mean? I said, well, I know what the answers are supposed to be, so I can score really well on the assessment. But honestly, I'm okay at it. I'm a lot better at it now than I was a few years ago. And I expect to be a lot better at it a year or two from now than I am right now. But EQ. Warren Buffett had this to say. So when the tide goes out, you discover who's been swimming naked. And maybe you can relate to this. I certainly can see this. It feels like the tide's gone out right now, probably farther, faster, and with maybe we're not sure when it comes back in. Then I bet for you, I bet for a lot of us, further, faster, and who knows when it comes back in a more extreme sense than ever before. I don't know if that's true for you, but a lot of times we say, wait a second, who's been swimming naked? And it's me, and maybe it's you. Maybe you're all of a sudden you're saying, I thought I was good at engaging my team. I was talking with an executive with Amazon.com a couple days ago. And I said, how you doing with this work from home thing? And he said, oh, really, really well. Really well. Yeah, I love it. It's phenomenal. He's got his first child on the way. He said, it's been awesome. I said, tell me more. He said, I feel like I'm getting more done, more productive, less distractions, less disruptions. I said, engagement in your work, it's off the charts. He said, oh yeah, it's amazing. It's unbelievable. And he used to have a pretty good commute. I don't know if any of you have in your life he had an hour and a half commute each way. So twice a day, 3 hours traveling. And I said, wow, that's awesome. All good. He said, I think so. And we were on a call like this. And I said, well, how about your team? And he did this. Oh, that's a different story. He said, some of them seem to be doing okay, but not all of them. And I share that with you because when the tide goes out, we figure out who's been swimming naked. And sometimes we realize that it's us in more ways than we might want to admit. Emotional intelligence. I want to start with this thought, actually, and I'd love for you to discuss this in the chat. Feel free. Throw your thoughts in the chat. Here's the question. We'll do this a bunch of times. Score yourself right now based on what you know about EQ or emotional intelligence. When I spoke on this topic for the Air Force, one of their commanders said, Jonathan, it's an oxymoron, emotional intelligence. And I said, yeah, you could be right. You could be right. And the same commander said, I'm not intelligent at all when I'm emotional. The two words don't fit together. But score yourself, 0 to 10. 10 is you're not world class. And 10 is you are consistently world class in your emotional intelligence. Score yourself. I'd love you to put it in the chat. Give yourself a score. 10, 3, 5.7. Go ahead. Put that in the chat for everyone to see. I want to see some scores. Let's see what we got. See what we got. What are your scores? Any tens? Any tens? Let me change the question. Let me change the question. As a driver, and I'd love for you to be involved as much in the questions I'll ask you throughout this time as you possibly can, if you want to get better at this topic. As a driver, score yourself. Are you above average as a driver of your car, I mean? Because you've been driving your car for, I'm guessing, at least 5 or 10 years, maybe 20 or 30 years, maybe more than that, as a driver. See, part of the problem with this topic is the same as the problem with driving. In the United States, and I live in New York, and this is definitely true where I live, 90% of Americans score themselves as being above average drivers. You know that this is not everyone where you live, don't you? You know it. I mean, have you seen people driving and answering an email? Have you seen this? Have you seen people driving and changing a song on their Pandora or Spotify? Have you seen this happen? Have you seen it happen? The answer is yes. You don't do it, right? If you did, it would be obviously because you're above average in your driving, right? Right. So the problem with EQ, same thing. See this same stat, 90% roughly, 90% of college professors think they're above average at engaging their students. 90% of doctors think they're above average at what they do. Have you experienced this stat? So that's part of our challenge with this topic. Let me change the way we approach the question. You've had someone come to your table and say you want fries with that or a salad, yes? You've had somebody come to your table and say you want fries with that or a salad. What do you feel like answering? What do you feel like saying? What do you feel like having tonight? Do you feel like having dessert? Do you feel like having fries and dessert? It's a similar question. Some people say you can summarize every adult decision we make based on this. Do you want fries with that or a salad with it? What is EQ? What is emotional intelligence? Well, it's not a new topic. It's not a new topic. People like me who are, speak and write, we love to pretend things are brand new, right? There's this phrase, thought leader, right? But really, you come across something new when it relates to human nature, it's probably just repackaged. Aristotle wrote a lot about emotional intelligence. I love this line. He said, anyone can become angry. That's easy. But the rest is not. Getting angry is easy, but doing it with the right person, right time, right purpose, right way, that's tough. That's tough. That's tough. EQ. I'm going to give you a few models and a few tools as we go through, but I'm going to start with a meeting that happened. And maybe you've been to a meeting like this. This is a real meeting. Happened a couple of years ago. I was working with one of my clients, big company, Fortune 100 company. And I was in the room with about 30 people. The company was profitable the year before. They made over $1 billion in profit the year before. And this meeting happened with only a few months left in the year. And the company was about to lose a little over $5 billion. That's hard to do. Very few companies can lose $5 billion. Virtually close to zero companies, other than Apple, Google would be one, could lose $5 billion every year for a few years and still exist, right? Well, this company was about to lose about $5.5 billion for the year. And this meeting was 30 people who run the business. The boss in this meeting loved to sit, he set the room up as a U, and he loved to sit at the bottom of the U. Think about this. Have you been to a meeting like this where there's some stress going on? There's some big, I wouldn't even call it a gorilla in the room. There is some problem that has everyone's attention, yes? But it's also one of those meetings that goes on for too long. Everyone flew to the meeting. No one was near their home. And everyone had been there for at least the second day at this point. It's almost lunchtime. And you've been in a meeting like this that went too long. You've probably been on a Zoom call that went too long. 30 people in the room. The head of quality is going through quality statistics, where the company is, where it should be, and what the game plan is to close that gap. 30 minutes into the quality person's presentation. It's almost lunchtime, and no one has uttered a word. No one has asked a question. No one has even gotten the quality person's attention. The quality person is just going through charts, maybe Six Sigma, X bar, R charts, all kinds of stats, all kinds of numbers, all kinds of data. Finally, and this is when we should be going to get lunch about now, the director, the boss, at the bottom of the U, doesn't say anything, just leans forward abruptly enough that the whole series of tables shifts. This boss, this everyone in the room, 29 other people, 29 people, me, the quality person, we all froze and stared at the director. You've been there, haven't you? When someone, you know something's coming. And we all just look at the director. We look at the boss. Then we look back at the quality person. Then we look back at the boss. Of course, people run out and get popcorn, right? The boss explodes towards the quality person. This is a bunch of, I won't repeat the phrases, but this is a bunch of garbage. Go back a few slides. No, don't, because I've seen this whole presentation before. I've watched this. This is the third time this year I've watched this mirror image presentation. What the, he just went off. He lost it. He, one of my youngest daughter, Maya, would call it freaking out. She's got a bunch of young cousins who freak out. They freak out. They throw themselves upon the floor and freak out when the director, the boss, freaked out. He lost it. He lost it for maybe 2 minutes, maybe 90 seconds. It seemed longer. The quality person, leaned forward, went back a few slides. I looked around the room, I think, hoping for help. And then the director just said, forget it, finish up. Quality person finished the next couple slides like that. No one said a word. And then we got up to go to lunch. Now, you've been in a meeting where something like this happened. I know you have. There's kind of 3 groups of people in the room. I want you to think about these 3 groups, and then I'll ask you a question about them. There's the boss, there's the quality person, and there are the witnesses. Yes, the boss, the quality person, the witnesses. You've lost it in your life towards someone, haven't you? Have you ever lost it towards someone with an audience? Some people are thinking, yeah, every 4th of July, Thanksgiving, Memorial Day, every time we have a barbecue, I have some of my family coming to visit in a couple of days. They're going to stay outside, of course. They'll want to hug my kids, right? You've experienced this where you lose it towards someone with an audience. You've probably been in all 3 situations. First question is this: which one do you relate to the most? The one who lost it? The one who was, I call it, being freaked out upon, the quality person? Or the witnesses? Which do you get to be most often? So imagine you're in that room and we all get up to leave for lunch. You get close to the door to go get lunch and you realize that you have to present your part of the business to the whole group as soon as we get back from lunch. What do you do during lunch? Do you go talk to the quality person? Do you talk to the boss? Do you talk to your peers about the quality person and the boss? Do you go on LinkedIn and update your profile? Do you text your spouse, significant other, friend at another company saying like, I'm out. Text your significant other saying, you still want to relocate? I heard anywhere up north is nicer than Texas this time of year. What do you do? And do you change your slides? See, the boss lost it. Here's a good picture of the boss losing it, I guess, if you will. But let's assess them for a second. I want you to pick one of those groups. And if you can, I'd love for you to do this in the chat. What emotions, pick one of the people, maybe it's the quality person, put a Q and list some of the emotions you think the quality person experienced when this happened, or one of the witnesses. What emotions did the witnesses experience when this happened, or the boss? What emotions did the boss experience when this happened? Put some of your notes in the chat, if you would. Or say, I will not participate in the chat. So I get to speak to a lot of groups around the world, and one of the questions I love asking is, I'll stop, maybe 10 minutes into a conversation, into a keynote speech, and I'll stop and I'll just maybe walk into the audience and I'll ask the question, how many of you will not raise your hand no matter what I ask today? And it's amazing how many people go, yeah, that's me. I'm not answering your question. I'm not answering your question. Which of these is you? Which of these is you? And what emotions do you think they're feeling? The quality person is feeling what? Are they feeling frustrated? Are they mad? Are they resentful? Are they bitter? Are they angry? Are they motivated, inspired? What do you think is going on with these people when this happens? I had dinner with the boss that night. And at one point, I asked him, he was one of my clients. I've been involved in leadership coaching, especially in turnarounds for a lot of my life, and then started a few businesses of my own. But at one point I asked him, I said, how do you think today went? How do you think today went? And he looked at me and said, Jonathan, I think it went really well. And I'm thinking, well, which part do you think went really well? And he talked about a few things. And then he said, I think every now and then you got to light a fire under people. And I think we got a fire going. Was he right? I mean, and what does this story tell us about emotional intelligence? Was the boss high in EQ? Was he low in EQ? Was the quality person high in EQ or low in EQ? The witnesses, what does it tell us about it? Well, here's one of my favorite models for EQ. Very, very simple model. And if you haven't done it yet, go to the my name, jonathanfanning.com/SETC. And the PDF that goes with it gives you some questions around this picture. But this is my favorite picture when it comes to EQ. On the top, it says awareness. On the bottom, it says management. On the left side, it says self. On the right side, it says other people in social situations with others, right? So it's awareness on the top and affecting it, doing something about it, influencing, or I should really say, I don't love the word management in there. I like the word attempting to influence. Trying to influence the emotions, your own on the bottom left, and trying to influence the emotions of others in the bottom right. Back to my story, the boss loses it, right? Was the boss high in the top left corner? Self-awareness? I don't know. The story doesn't really tell you that. Was he high in the bottom left corner? Self-management. Some of you are thinking no, but a few of you are probably thinking maybe. See, the boss lost it on purpose. He lost it on purpose. And some of you love him right now, but most of you don't. Most of you listen. Most of you probably don't like that boss right now. He lost it on purpose. Here's why. His team was responsible for losing $5.5 billion. That equates to more than 10,000 people that the company laid off not long after this meeting. More than 10,000 people they laid off not long after this meeting. The boss was mad about this, and he looked around and he said, no one else seems to be bothered. Everyone in this room seems to be going about business as usual. So he said, I will make sure they know this bothers me. So now, was he better at the bottom left corner? At getting angry by choice? In other words, choosing to allow his emotions, something to bother him? I don't know. I want to pause for a second. I want you to score yourself on this. 0 to 10. 10, world-class, consistently. Top left corner. Aware of your emotions. Awareness of your emotions. I'm going to add something to the top section. I like to call the top section recipes. I like to call it recipes. If maybe you make chili. Imagine we know someone who makes phenomenal chili. Phenomenal chili. By the way, Texas. I learned a lesson a few years ago speaking in Texas. I usually go to Texas maybe a dozen times a year to speak. And I was speaking in Texas, and before I checked out of my hotel, I was having breakfast, and I asked the person at the breakfast area, I said, where's a good place to get barbecue around here? Local barbecue. And the person said, oh, huh, how much time you got? And I thought, oh no, I asked the wrong person the wrong question. And he went on to tell me about places 2 hours away. He said, oh, well, there's a place. Are you heading towards Austin? Well, there's a place on the east side of, and he went through all of these places. And I'm thinking, I don't have that kind of time. I don't have that kind of time. Recipes. If you made phenomenal barbecue, right? Let's say you have an incredible recipe for barbecue, or somebody does, and they give that recipe to me. I try to make that barbecue, and I start making that. How would it turn out? I mean, I have the recipe. How would it turn out? Could I still mess it up? The answer is, of course, yes, right? Now, imagine I don't pay close attention to quantities, in particular as it relates to salt. And this is a very important point. I'm going through the recipe, and the person who has this, maybe it's you, are watching me, helping me, coaching me, and I'm nailing it. But then comes to salt, and I take out my salt shaker, and it's been moist and damp, and my salt is a clump. It's a big clump. So I take the top off, and I take that big chunk of hardened salt, and I throw it in to the recipe. How's the recipe now? I mean, do you eat the barbecue with that salt? I messed up the salt in a big way. Do you even come close? Probably not, right? You probably don't. What if I say I don't really like salt? I don't put any salt in it. Do you eat it now? So I share this with you because I like to call the top recipes. In other words, do you know your emotional state, but do you also know what ingredients go into creating different emotional states? And I like to call the bottom the influencing of emotions, the affecting of emotions, the management of emotions. I like to call it salt. I like to call it salt because it gets at the idea that there are a few ingredients that have a massive impact on people's emotional states. There are a few ingredients. And we have to ask the question. I asked you to score yourself 0 to 10 in each of the 4 quadrants, right? Top left, knowing your recipe. You feel overwhelmed when? You feel focused when? You start to feel frustrated when? You start to get angry when? You're embarrassed when? Your most creative moments happen when, right? Top left corner. The bottom left corner says, do you own the salt, or have you given the salt to other people? And that should bother you a little bit, because if I had you score yourself a second time, in all 4 quadrants, 0 to 10, 10 consistently world-class, 0 awful, non-existent. But I said, wait a second, let's say this time you're scoring yourself when somebody that you've given the salt to comes to visit. We all have people like that. We all have someone, when they email us, when they text us, maybe they're in one of our meetings. When they show up for the meeting, they own our emotional state more than we do. Our 0 to 10, maybe it's a 7 or 8. I don't know. Maybe it's 90% above average, right? It goes down radically. It goes down quickly. We let them, maybe, I don't know. There's a great expression that says behind every successful person is a very surprised mother-in-law. Maybe the bottom left corner is somebody in your family. Maybe it's somebody in your home. Maybe it's maybe you coach a sport, and maybe it's a parent from one of the kids on the team. Maybe it's one of your neighborhood kids. Maybe it's one of your children's teachers. But there are people, and there are situations that we've given the salt to. We've handed the salt, and maybe we think they took it, but we've allowed them to take it. Top section, bottom section. Top right says, do you know the recipes of the people around you? My Amazon executive. How engaged is your team right now? I told that Amazon executive about this experience I had. Top right corner, social awareness, being aware of other people. I told him I was speaking for a big conference, about 10,000 business owners in Sydney, Australia. And I was the keynote speaker on innovation, on creative leadership for entrepreneurs, for leaders, for people who are trying to make change. How do you unlock creativity, not just in you, but in your team? And so the conference was in Sydney. And while I was there, I took the ferry to the Sydney Opera House, Circular Quay, I think it's called, Circle Quay. You know, and I'm on the ferry pulling up to the Opera House, and I'm reading Stephen Covey's son, Stephen Covey as well, wrote a book called, I think it's just called Speed of Trust. And it's about trust. It's about building trust and how quickly we can get things done once trust is there. Well, I'm reading the book on the ferry towards the Opera House. There's one sentence in the book that I read, and I just, it floored me. The sentence floored me. I read the sentence again. I literally ripped the page out of the book, and I threw the book into the harbor, the Sydney harbor, and watched it sink. And I just took this page and I actually ripped pieces of the page off because I only needed the one sentence. I didn't need any other lesson from the book. The sentence said, listen for, not just to. Listen for what your team is not willing to say. Listen for when people around you are excited, but they're not telling you. Listen for when somebody around you is nervous or concerned or frustrated, but they're not telling you. They're not telling you. Now, I'm going to ask you a brutally honest question. Have you ever nodded someone on? Have you ever been in a conversation where you nod them on? You ever nod people on a Zoom call? They're talking and they say something and you go, yeah, yep, oh wow, no way, yeah. You ever do that? You ever nod people on? I know the answer. I'm pretty good at nodding people on. You know, I read that sentence and I thought, I don't even listen to that well. Forget the listening for. Forget the listening for. And that's why I ripped the page out. Did I really rip the page out? The answer is no. But I know how your brain works, and I know that you remember things better if there's a visual example. Awareness. Awareness of, you can be aware of generic recipes, general recipes, but the top right, the whole right side of this is a mess. The whole right side of it. Why? Charlie Brown put it, I think, best. Charlie Brown said, I love mankind. It's really just the people I can't stand. You know, and the right side gets at the people, because you have, let's say you manage a team of 10. They all have different recipes, don't they? They feel heard when what? It's not one recipe for all 10. You've got somebody on your team that they need more time with you, period, or they will not feel valued. They won't feel like there's a strong enough relationship. I mean, let's be honest. Do you have anyone in your life that if they send you an email or they text you or they call you, if they don't get the response quickly enough, they feel like there's something wrong in the relationship at the moment? Do you have someone like that in your life? I know the answer to that. And it's why this whole picture, it's beautiful, but it's a mess. It's a mess. Daniel Goleman wrote a chunk of books, a pile of books, a big stack, and they're all big books, 400, 500, 600-page books about this topic, Daniel Goleman. People call him kind of the father of emotional intelligence. Not even remotely true, because the topic is not, it's been around since the beginning of time. And thousands of writers have written about it. Shakespeare wrote about it. He just didn't use the phrase. But Daniel Goleman, when he scores on an EQ test, he scores right around the 50th percentile. He's about average. Does he understand it? Yes. Is he a master at it? No. This is a science, an art, whatever. It's a combination of two, but it's something that you could study for the rest of your life and still not think you're there. Martin Luther King Jr. was killed when he was 39 years old. His wife said, his widow, Coretta, said, Martin never thought he was good enough to be doing what he was doing. And as a result, he never stopped studying people, studying human nature, studying communication, studying the art of engaging people and inspiring and challenging them at the same time, having them walk away feeling uplifted, but also like they had to do something. They had to take action to make something change. He never stopped studying it. He never stopped studying it. So my challenge for you, and we'll dig into ways to do this, but my challenge for you is to pick one of these four. One of these four. A year from now, you'll be better at what? A year from now, you'll be better at which one? You'll be better at noticing your emotional state. You'll be better at affecting your emotional state. You'll be better at noticing other people's emotional states. It's so simple. You could pick one person in your life, and after every interaction with them, say, you know what? Where were they? What were they thinking about? What were they worried about? What were they excited about? Did I notice enough of that? What question could I have asked that might have gotten them more engaged? What statement could I have made that might have made them more confident or more comfortable in the interaction? All models are wrong, but some are useful. All models are wrong, but some are useful. I'm going to give you a few models. Here's one of them. I love this model. I love to take all emotions and put them onto an engagement scale. Of course, it's not the perfect model. It's far from perfect, but all the way on the right is 100% engaged. You can see on the screen, 100% engaged. I want you to score yourself right now. How engaged are you? And be honest, you don't have to post it in the chat, but how engaged are you right now in what we're talking about? How engaged are you right now in what we're talking about? Where are you on the scale? 0, 10, 30, 25, 73, 94. Where are you right now in being engaged in this topic? On the left side, I like to call it Q and S. And I call it Q and S, 0% engaged. I call it Q and S because most organizations I speak for tell me that they don't have enough acronyms. I know in your world, you don't have enough acronyms. You just don't. I was speaking for the SEC, Security and Exchange Commission, the SEC, down in Manhattan a couple of years ago. And I was picking on them for the number of acronyms they use. And one of their leaders said, Jonathan, we don't have too many acronyms. We have the right amount. And I said, oh, really? How do you figure? And she said, well, if we used any less acronyms, it would take a lot longer to communicate. And that's why we've got so many acronyms. And I thought, okay, that's valid. She said, so maybe you could, since you speak all over, maybe you could give people a gift from us. She said, this is from the SEC, this gift. She said, everywhere you speak, give them one new acronym. And I thought that was kind of funny. So I thought, I will. So here's one for you right now. Q and S, left side of the chart, 0% engaged. 0% engaged, I call it Q and S. It stands for quit and stayed. Quit and stayed. Have you ever worked with someone who they quit? They stopped working. It was actually 3 years ago. They stopped working in 2017, but they still show up every day. Quit and stayed. Most people think that's kind of funny. But if we're honest about this, we quit and stay things all the time. You go to a meeting. I bet there's a meeting you've gone to maybe every Tuesday for the last 7 years. It's an hour long. You go to the meeting every Tuesday. You quit the meeting, maybe 3 minutes into it, but you sit there anyway. 0% engaged. 0% engaged. Here's my question for you on this chart. The director, the boss, the quality person, and the witnesses, which way did they go in their engagement after that meeting I talked about in the beginning of our conversation? Which way did their engagement go? Did their engagement, the quality person, after this 2-minute explosion, the quality person's engagement shifted up or shifted down? Quality person. The witnesses, the 20 witnesses, where'd their engagement go? Did their engagement shift up or down? See, and people say, Jonathan, this is not a perfect model. And I said, yeah, that's why I said all models are wrong. Some are useful. It's not a perfect model, right? Because somebody in that room, so maybe one of the 28 witnesses, became very engaged, go through the screen to the left, became 100% engaged in making sure the boss failed. There are people throughout the world that are actively engaged in helping their organizations fail. Isn't that true? Isn't that true? Of course it is. Most people in the workforce in the US are between 40 and 60% engaged. Just that middle little chunk of this chart, 40 to 60% engaged. You have 4 people working for you. You have 4 employees, and they're 50% engaged in their work. What do they get done? What do you pay them for? You pay them the equivalent of 4, and you get the equivalent of, let's say, about 2. See, here's why I share this model, as imperfect as it is. You and I have an incredible ability to affect engagement. We have an incredible ability to affect engagement, starting with our own. Let me go back to your engagement. You're engaged in this conversation somewhere on this chart. If you had to take a big step to the right, let's say you're 75% engaged. If you had to take a big step to the right, what would you have to do to make that happen? What would you have to do to make that happen? See, we love to ask the question, what does the world have to do to make this happen? It's a poor question. It's a foolish question. What does someone else have to do to affect my world? But we tend to ask it by default. We tend to say things like, oh, that really frustrated me. Oh, this is really bothering me. This is really aggravating me. This is really annoying me. So-and-so really made me mad. And what are we doing? Let me go back to this picture for a second. On the bottom left corner, what are we doing? What are we doing with our language when we say things like that? Here's what we're doing. Essentially, we're saying the bottom left corner does not exist. It does not exist. What the world does, in one of my books, Who Are You Becoming? I have a chapter called Happen to the World. I wrote the chapter because I was working with leaders around the world, and I noticed that even in leadership roles, so many of us allowed the world to happen to us. For example, has email ever happened to you? First thing you do when you get up in the morning, you check your emails. A lot of us check the news maybe. And have you ever had the news happen to your emotional state? You ever have social media happen to your emotional state? And if we're brutally honest about this, a lot of the algorithms in social media, they're geared towards triggering our emotions. Why? Because then you stay there. Do you know how many technologists spend their time trying to make sure you use this more tomorrow than you did today? They study this topic. And part of us, our language says the bottom left corner of this doesn't exist. I'll give you an example. My daughters, Ella and Maya. Ella's 13 now, Maya's 9. One day, Maya had a friend over, and they're playing in the backyard on the trampoline. This is a couple months ago. Playing in the back on the trampoline. And then Maya's friend goes in the house crying. And then my wife comes out with Maya's friend, and she glares at my older daughter, Ella, and she says, Ella, why did you make Madison cry? Why did you make Maya's friend cry? And Ella, my 13-year-old, my soon-to-be high schooler, 9th grader, says, I didn't make her cry. I'm not in charge of her emotional state. At which point, you know exactly what happened. My wife looked at me, and she made me cry. Yes? She said, what are you doing to our daughter? But was my daughter correct or not? We use language that says, you have the salt. 100%. People make us feel a certain way. How did that make you feel? How often do you hear this question? How did that make you feel? Well, the language says the bottom left corner doesn't exist. Back to my question. If you had to shift your engagement right now, a big notch to the right, what do you do to make it happen? You probably already have answers, don't you? You probably already have answers. Where did these people go? Quality person went up or down in engagement. Witnesses went up or down in engagement. The boss went up or down in engagement. The boss was pretty sure most of them went up in engagement, and he was actually correct about most of the people in the room. Most of the people in the room actually were waiting for a moment when someone would say, enough is enough. Was that the perfect way to do it? Absolutely not. but he was trying to do it. He was trying to do it. The quality person left the company 20 months later. 20 months later. The quality person, I knew this person very, very well. Wasn't a 50% engaged person. Was more like a 90 plus person. Was a person that worked 60, 70, sometimes 80 hours a week. Was a person that you could get on email, on text, pretty much 7 days a week. You'd get an answer usually pretty quickly, and usually a thoughtful answer. Engagement very, very high. After this meeting, that person decided time to start looking for another place to work. But I've got time. I'm not in a hurry. I'm not in a hurry. Not long after this meeting, that company flew a private jet to Washington, D.C., because they were talking about loans to keep their industry in existence. That company didn't take a loan, but their two friends did. Here's part of the point. You and I have this amazing gift of an ability to affect engagement. And maybe we need to take it more seriously than we currently do. I want to tell you a story that leads into a model for helping shift our emotions. There's a story that happened a couple of years ago. My wife and I, before we had kids, took a trip to the Dominican Republic. And I mentioned before we had kids because now we know don't get that close together because there are consequences. Yes? You know, I'm kidding. But before we had kids, we took this trip, and I booked a horseback riding excursion to, along the cliffs near Punta Cana, looking over the ocean. I figured we'd see the sunset during from the cliffs. Beautiful horseback ride. The brochure makes it incredibly romantic. Well, the guide brings out the horses, and this is my horse. This is my horse. This picture didn't happen on this trip because when he brought out my horse, he was pulling my horse. He was dragging. My horse did not want to go anywhere. He brings the horse out and he looks through. There's a group of about 25 of us. He points at me. He says, "Hey, your horse." And I'm 6'4". I played a lot of sports, basketball and baseball in college. I thought, oh, he's giving me a good horse, Yeah. I get on the horse, and my horse, I guess you could say he never read the brochure. He went to the front of the group. My horse immediately went to the front of the group. We start riding. My wife is on horse maybe number 10 or 12. She's way behind me, and we're creating a little more space as we ride. And I'm looking back saying, "Hun, come on." And she waves to me. She's like, "Come back here." So I try to slow down the horse. Question. In Texas, maybe you've done this before, but how do you slow down a horse? How do you slow down a horse? Oh, it's simple, right? You just pull back. Yes, you just give it a pull. I tried that. I pulled the horse back, and you know what he did? He did this. He went, he shook his whole head and kind of chugged me around. And I tried it again. I tried it again. Maybe 6 or 8 times into it, he didn't just shake his head, but he did this sort of shimmy, and then he turned. And he looked back at me, one eye right on the side of the head, that one eye staring at me. And my horse, and this took a split second, but he said, "Don't do that again. Do not do that again." And I looked at him, and apparently he thought I said, "What do you mean?" Because he said, "You know exactly what I mean." Did that conversation really happen? Did the conversation really happen? The answer is yes, it did. Yes, it did. And here's how you know that's the answer. If you've got children anywhere in your life, at some point you've looked at that kid, some child in your life, and said, "Stop, done," without saying a word. Isn't that true? Isn't that true? You have sent incredibly clear messages just through your eyes. Maybe you've got somebody on your team that's always coming up with stuff. Well, what if we did this? Why don't we do this? Oh, I don't know about that. Blah, blah, right? And you've looked at that person in a meeting with just a glance, just a little glance. And that person, the message was delivered. Yes. Yes. I mean, we could dig into the science of this, but I don't think we need to. We need to do something with the lesson. The lesson is emotions are contagious. Emotions are contagious. Emotion, especially when we're close and especially when there's eye contact, emotions are contagious. Are yours worth catching? And that's worth writing down. That's worth stopping and writing down. Emotions are contagious or mine worth catching, because today, at some point, you're going to interact with someone and your emotions will be contagious. They'll get infected to a degree. And you could say that around a lot of emotions. You could say it around courage. You could say it around doubt. You could say it around, I think we're going to figure this out. You could say it around, I think we're done. You know, you could say it around, I think you'll figure this out. I believe in you. You could say it around, I don't believe. You've disappointed me again, and I'm used to it. I'm just waiting for the next time. This is worth writing down. And it's worth, if you get nothing else out of this webinar, I hope that's one little thing where you say, you know what? Because for all of us, me absolutely included, there are times when my emotions would not be good to spread to the other person. I think you've got what it takes. I don't think you've got what it takes. See, we do this, don't we? We do this, don't we? It makes the recipe I'm going to walk you through worth putting some time and effort into. Let me go back to the story. The guide tells us, he says, look, we're doing a big loop. He says, at the halfway point, there's a massive boulder. He said, I'll stop at the boulder and wait for the rest of the group. And he said, you can go back at your own pace. There's one trail that meanders back to the corral. Well, my horse understood that part. Go at your own pace. We get to the boulder, the guide stops, and my horse thinks he's at the Kentucky Derby. My horse thinks he's at Preakness or Belmont, or, I've spoken at Saratoga so many times now in upstate New York. He thinks he just goes into a full gallop. And I was not enjoying myself. I was resisting with everything I've got. I thought I was going to end up on the ground or shredded against the barbed wire, because every time we were near the corral, he would bank these turns in the sand where I thought, I'm going to lose my leg or my arm. Barbed wire and fences so close and trees so close. We get back to the corral. He slams on the brakes, ducks his head into the water, and I shimmy off of his backside and I get away from him. A few questions. Who's in charge of my ride? Who was in charge of my ride? And this is where usually somebody says, I had a woman in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. She said, Jonathan, if you knew what you're doing, the horse wouldn't have done that. She said, if you knew what you were doing, the horse wouldn't have done that. And I looked at her and I said, you can have the salt. And I was not happy. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? Somebody says something like that to you. Do you give them the salt and you go on a roller coaster emotional ride? What do you mean if I knew what I was doing? I'll tell you what, I'll buy the plane tickets, you and me. Let's go Dominican Republic right now, put you on that horse and show me. Why don't you show me, Do you give people the salt like that? Do you ever give people the salt that are complete strangers, but the way they looked at you, what they said, or just the stuff going on in your life, and you just allowed the salt to be handed over? Or somebody on the road take the salt from you. You don't even know what they look like. You don't even know what, you know that car though, and you want to take that car out. Well, she says, if you knew what you were doing, if you knew what you're doing, who's in charge of my ride, me or the horse? Who's stronger, me or the horse? You think the horse has ever done this before? Apparently they do at least 2 rides every day, usually a sunrise and a sunset, and usually a late morning and an early evening. So usually it's 4 rides a day, but at least 2 pretty much every day. So sunrise, sunset, somewhere around 10 or 11 a.m., another ride, somewhere around 5, 6 p.m., depending on the time of year, another ride. But do you think the horse has ever done this before? Yes, he did it yesterday. He did it today, and he will do it tomorrow. See, for this horse, yesterday, today, and tomorrow are identical. Who's stronger, me or the horse, by a factor of, I don't know. 500 years ago, Erasmus of Rotterdam, an advisor actually to the King of England and to Thomas More, he wrote, the emotional brain is 24 times more powerful than the rational brain. How much stronger is the horse than me? I don't know if it's 24. I don't know if Erasmus was dead on in that, but it's a lot stronger, isn't it? If you could do a field trip, you could do a conference in Dominican Republic, Punta Cana, and you get to pick who goes on the horse. maybe it's a family reunion. Who do you put on the horse? Who do you put on the horse? See, this story is our emotional responses to things, isn't it? You hit that boulder, and this is what happened. And yesterday, today, and tomorrow tend to repeat, don't they? If you're not sure about that, think about this. I know a couple married for maybe 17 years now. They argue about the same few things, like clockwork, And I mean, it's the horse. And I could tell you what he's going to say. I can tell you what she's going to say. I can tell you how long that will bother each one of them. And I can tell you how biting their question or comment or sarcastic look. Well, it's a yesterday, today, and tomorrow. The problem with this is our emotional brain. I mean, I put it this way. Imagine my horse in your head running your emotional life. Imagine my horse in your head watching on a flat screen, on a big screen, watching your whole life and telling you how to respond automatically to things. He said that, here's what you're going to do. He did that, you're going to do. She said that, she wrote this, you got that email. Oh, it's budget time again. Oh, you got to deal with finance. Oh, you have a meeting with legal. Oh, and we have these little emotional loops, don't we? And a lot of us, we do this yesterday, today, and tomorrow, over and over and over again. How do we affect it? I'm going to give you a couple tools for how we affect it. One of my favorites is this one. Yale University has been using this tool for, I think, close to 20 years now. And they use it with CEOs of companies, and they use it with kindergartners, and a lot of people in between. I'd love for you to put your thoughts in the comments, but I'm going to walk through the tool, and I want you to think about where you spend most of your time. But first, score yourself right now. The bottom, you see this gauge of pleasantness. How pleasant do you feel right now? +5 is as pleasant as, +5, you're thinking, Jonathan, I could be doing so many other things right now, but this is the best. Like if I would, we could be at the lake, or we could be having barbecue. You talked about barbecue before. We could be doing that. We could be doing both. We could be having barbecue on a boat at the lake. I could be in the mountains hiking. I could be, gambling. There's so many things I could be, but this is it. This is the best. I couldn't feel more pleasant than I feel right now. That's +5. You're not a +5 right now. You're not. But I want you to score yourself between -5 and +5 on this mood meter. Give yourself a score. What's your score? And I don't care if it's 1.8, -2.3, +4.6. I don't care. +4, +3. Give yourself a score, plus or minus on the pleasantness and where. Then look at the left side, energy. +5, -5. +5 is off the chart. +5 is like, Jonathan, look, can we make the webinar longer? And I'd love to talk to the group for about a half an hour, because I've got some things I want to cover. And let's stand up while we're doing it, because your energy is just there, right? It's a little after 1 o'clock right now where you are. You're probably not at a +5 in energy right now. Probably not. Good chance you're not. I was speaking in Des Moines, Iowa, a couple of years ago, and I had the chance to share the stage with the football player, quarterback Jim Kelly, who lost 4 Super Bowls in a row. And it's kind of funny. He tells the story of losing Super Bowl after Super Bowl after Super Bowl, and he's kind of picking on himself. And when I got up, I said, I have not lost 4 Super Bowls. I've never lost a Super Bowl in my life, but when Jim Kelly's done speaking, he typically asks a few questions, and if people answer his trivia, he throws a football to them. So they have to stand up where they are and catch the football. And he said, I got too many people thinking they got the answer, but they don't really know the answer, jumping the gun, if you will, false start. And he said, so what I do is now, if you think you know the answer to my trivia and you get it wrong, you got to put $100 in a hat, and they bring it up to me. And he says, and if somebody in your row, if you get 2 wrong in your row, everybody in the row has to put $100. But when people stand up to catch that football, it affects their energy, doesn't it? It affects their energy. All of a sudden they're like, yeah, let's go, throw it, bring it. Or they're like, oh no. -5 is no energy. -5 is no energy. 0 energy. Where are you in the mood meter? Are you in the yellow, the green, the blue, the red? The yellow is high pleasant and high energy. The green is high pleasant but low energy. The red is high energy but not so pleasant, and the blue is low energy and low pleasant. And I want you to think about this. Do you move around on this mood meter? See, a simple way to use this tool. I love this tool. It's so simple. It's so simple. And you can use it without the picture. You can just use the pleasantness side. And just a few times a day. It helps with awareness, yes? Helps with that top left corner, self-awareness. Rate your pleasantness a few times a day. Maybe every hour, you just have your phone beep for a couple days. Maybe just for one day. You jot down your pleasantness score a few times in that one day. And you start to get a feel for, wow, early afternoons, my pleasantness goes way down. Or maybe if you're plotting both, or maybe you're just plotting energy, maybe you start to see that your energy has some major spikes and some major dips. And maybe at that point, you start thinking, I could do something to influence that better than I currently do. Right in the beginning of our conversation, I said, I'm finishing up 2 books right now. I'm finishing 2 books. One is on creative leadership, and the other is on life's biggest questions and how we love to hide from them. And I do 2 at the same time now, because I noticed that my energy is much higher when I'm working on 2 separate projects like that take a lot of energy and focus. And I found out that some of my favorite writers in history would write multiple books at the same time, including J.R.R. Tolkien, who wrote Lord of the Rings. He worked on that book for, I think, somewhere around 30 years and wrote a lot of other things at the same time, and then would come back to that book. And that's what I'll do. I'll write a chunk and then write a chunk. And sometimes I'm much, much, much more energized coming back to it. GE, I was involved in GE's leadership program right out of college. It's always, year after year, considered one of the best in the world, in the top few in the world. And one of their pillars for a great leader at GE is energy. Energy. Another of their pillars is energize. Different words. Do you have energy? Are you good at managing your own energy? And energize, are you good at energizing other people? So try this mood meter for a little bit. Just scoring yourself, and then moving around on it. I like to call it the 8 questions, really. 8 questions, but there's only 2 words total in all 8 questions. The 2 words are where and how. Where and how. Where are you right now on the mood meter? And the how could deal with 2 different things. One is, how'd you get there? The second is, how do you know? How do you know you're there? How do you make that assessment? My energy right now is a 3. How'd you get there, and how do you make that assessment? That's the first set of where how. The second set of where how is, where do you want to be on the mood meter right now? Where do you want to be? Where are you, and where do you want to be? Where do you want to be might be based on appropriateness, might be based on the current task. I'll give you a really simple example. I spend a lot of time on innovation and creativity. My TED Talk, my first TED Talk is on creative leadership. And so many leaders that have creativity are not as good at drawing out or unlocking the creativity in the people around them as they are at doing it for themselves. And part of it sometimes has to do with this mood meter. What do I mean? Well, you want to get the best ideas out of people around you. Where do you come from on the mood meter? And of course, it's not a formula. Of course, it's not, right? Because Charlie Brown, right? Because people are complicated. People they have different recipes, don't they? But let me give you an example from Walt Disney's life. Walt Disney always brought a tremendous amount of energy to his projects. He was always consistently in the top in energy. Only a few times in his life did he have some dips. Bring a lot of energy. He noticed that when he didn't use this mood meter, but he noticed that sometimes when he was with the team trying to get their best ideas out, sometimes they would let him go. They would just let him go because he had this idea and this idea and this idea. Why? What if we did this? Why can't we do this? Oh, that'd be amazing to do this. And he started to realize that what he needed to do and what he started doing consistently is asking a question with his energy and then walking away. He did it with the designer for the entrance to Disneyland, Marvin Davis. He said, Marvin, I want you to put together some stuff. Like, what should the entrance to Disneyland, to this magical place, be? And Marvin Davis drew up something and he showed it to Walt, and Walt said, wow. And Marvin looked at him and Marvin said, what do you think? And Walt said, well, it's really hard to decide between one. And then he walked away. He walked away. When you walk away, effectively, your energy is going to -5, isn't it? Your energy in that situation is going to -5. So Marvin had no Walt's energy in the room at that time. And Marvin said he came up with a couple more options. And then a few days later, Walt stops by again, says, what you got? Where'd you go? Where'd you come up with from since then? And Marvin showed him. And Walt said, I love seeing where you're going. This is amazing. I can't wait to see what else you come up with. And Walt walked away again. Eventually, Marvin Davis came up with 129 different options for what the entrance to Disneyland could look like. He said at one point, I was really, really frustrated with Walt because I thought, come on, don't we have enough? And he said, I finally realized that Walt wanted every single possible idea that he could draw out of you before he had to decide, because he wanted excellence. He wanted excellence. So how do you do that when you're actually there? I'll give you a simple approach. Four-word question. A four-word question. For the next day, maybe for a whole week. Try this. Try asking this four-word question and keep score. How often do you ask it in a day? How often do you ask it and actually expect an answer? The four-word question is so simple. It's, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And of course, you could ask that question a lot of different ways, couldn't you? You could say, what do you think we're missing here? What questions do you think we're not asking? Where do you think we're not spending enough time? What do you think could go wrong? What do you think is an option that we're not seeing? What do you think, if our company were sold to so-and-so, what do you think they would do with this problem? If we were a small business, what do you think they would do? If we were more entrepreneurial, if we were run by millennials, if we were run by people who, at the turn of the century, what would they do? What do you think? There's a million ways to ask the question. But the challenge is score yourself for maybe a week, maybe a whole week. How often do I ask, what do you think? And actually let people, allow people, expect people, lower my energy enough to get some answers. If people aren't answering you that often, there's a decent chance emotions are contagious. There's a decent chance emotions are contagious, and they're catching something from you. Maybe they're catching from you. You don't think that they've got a good answer. I was doing a turnaround with one of the probably most famous retail companies in the world, and one of their execs, we'll call him Joe. Joe is phenomenal at solving problems. He had a good team. But if he was there, none of them solved any problems. He'd say, where are we going with this? So what's our approach? What's our strategy? What are we going to do there? How are we going to deal with that? Do we hire this person or not? Or what are we changing the budget or not? And he'd ask these questions. And he was one of my clients. I'd watch his team just look at him. And they knew Joe would answer his own question. They knew it was coming. So they didn't have to. They did not have to. Where do you spend most of your time in here? Are you good at moving around in this picture? Where are you now? How'd you get there? Where do you want to be? And how will you move in that direction? I said there are 8, right? Those are the first 4. The next 4 are almost the same. Pick somebody in your world. Where are they right now? How did they get there, or how do you know? Where do you want to try to influence them to go? And how will you do that? You've got people in your life right now that just they're down, they're upset, they're frustrated, they're low in the pleasantness. Do you want to help them move a little to the right? Maybe you do. Maybe you do. If you do, what's your strategy to do that? And it forces us to start paying attention to other people's recipes. I find this tool to be incredibly useful. There's a whole bunch of versions on it as apps online. You can look them up. Mood Meter, Yale University Mood Meter. But I don't know that you need an app or a tool, but just the concept of paying attention. Where am I and how do I get there? Where am I and how do I get there? Where do I want to go and how do I move there? Let me spend a moment on what I call penduluming. Penduluming. So I meet a lot of people that pendulum. What I mean by penduluming is maybe they're always high energy and they go from +5 in pleasantness to -5 in pleasantness. I know one mother in particular that does that. She's so happy and excited to be hanging out with the kids, or she's off the charts in it is bedtime. Enough. I said bed. And she will pendulum. You know someone that does this. When you give people in your world feedback, especially tough feedback, especially your performance is not what it needs to be. Where does it come from on this mood meter? I've watched it over and over again. A lot of people give feedback that's tough. That's, you know what? Here's the bar. And here's where you have been. Here's what your actual effort, energy, responsibility, performance. There's a gap. And I've watched people give this feedback. And it comes from off the charts unpleasantness, -5, -7. Or more often, especially lately, I see it comes from +2 pleasantness. And the person walks away from getting that feedback thinking, I'm doing pretty good. I'm having a good year. And they didn't hear the message. The message wasn't delivered. I want to challenge you to practice saying an expression. I don't care what, pick an expression. I think you're doing okay. There are some things you could improve. Practice saying it in the spot that you think is most appropriate on this mood meter. Bottom left, just for 1 second. Bottom left, a couple of years ago, actually it was a Thursday, almost 20 years ago, 19 years ago now. My uncle was pulled aside. It was September 13th, 2001. And my uncle was pulled aside. So he was a part of the FDNY, Fire Department of New York. And they asked him if he would help with a really important project. The really important project was to be on funeral duty for the 343 firefighters that went down with the tower. My uncle spent his life in the fire department. He has 2 sons that are in the fire department. One's a lieutenant, one's a chief now. They spent a lot of time at Ground Zero. They were there when the towers came down, all of them. My uncle gets along with everybody, and had been in a lot of different locations within the fire department and had done training, everything you can imagine. So he knew people everywhere. And they said, Joe, would you do this for us? And they had no bodies. So they said, well, we'll have probably 3 funerals every single day over the course of almost 4 months. Because so many of these people had overlapping relationships and overlapping family members, and people would want to come to many of the funerals. So my Uncle Joe went to almost every single one of those. I saw him that year on Thanksgiving, and it was getting to him. You see, because he wanted to go and not just be there, not just check the box, but be there. So before he went, he'd spend time thinking about what's going on in their lives. Who do I know from this ladder company? What stories can I share with these people? Can I tell them about, and he'd be reliving some of this stuff. And did I see that person when's the last time I was with that person or that chief or and he wanted to really be with them. He had a strategy to get himself into the blue. He also needed and developed a good strategy to help himself slowly get out of the blue. Maybe that matters. That little story matters to you because maybe you're good at getting into the blue, but not good at getting out of it. Maybe that story helps you because you're not really good at getting into the blue, and you need to start spending time thinking about some people in your world and what could be bothering them. You know, I had 2 kids, twins, in a leadership program not too long ago. They were born in 2000. They were born in October of 2000, the twins, and their father died in the towers. He was one of the firemen. Right before their first birthday, the mother was really mad at the world, mad at everybody, mad at everything, you know, and had the kids. And I spent some time thinking about it and getting into the blue with the mother, talking to her about stuff. Do you have some effective strategies to help you move around? Do you have some effective strategies to help some people in your world to move around? Worth spending some time with this picture. I'm going to skip that page. Really interesting formula to play around with. And I give this, download the PDF if you haven't yet. I give you this tool in there. I call it the arrangement. I call it the arrangement because this arrangement, we all make this arrangement in a lot of ways. And it's unwritten, it's unspoken. Unwritten and unspoken, meaning it's never been communicated, the arrangement. It's never really been communicated, but it carries a significant emotional weight. And here's the arrangement. I work, right? I work, I get paid, right? I do this, you do that. I do this, I get that, right? You give me this, I give you that, right? That's the trade, it's the arrangement, right? My inputs, if you see on the left side, versus my rewards. But there's a lot underneath the water. There's a lot on the bottom of the iceberg, if you will. If you look at this little picture, there's things like responsibility. There's things like change that I'll deal with. There's things like maybe travel. There's things like availability. There's things like how many hours will I work? There's things like how quickly will I respond to an email? Family member of mine, his company was sold to Walmart, and he was not traveling much until Walmart bought his company. The company's jet.com. They paid $3.3 billion for the company a year after it opened. And my family member all of a sudden finds himself traveling a massive amount right after his wedding and finding out they're due with their first child. They're going to have their first child. And underneath the iceberg was how much travel am I willing, how much mobility am I willing to give? How much commitment am I willing to put in? How many hours am I willing to be on the road for this job? See, unwritten, unspoken, but carry significant emotional weight. Here's my challenge for you, and it's in the PDF, in the download. Write out one of your arrangements. Just write out one. Pick any one. I don't care what it is. Maybe you live in my house. As long as you live in my house, here's what I do. Here's what you do. You live in my house. You know, maybe it's around money. Maybe it's around how much money you'll spend on vacation. Maybe it's around how much money you'll spend on renovations in your house. Maybe it's in your work. Maybe it's, are we allowed to go over budget? And what happens to somebody who goes over budget? What if they go over budget every single year? So we've got all these arrangements. I challenge you to write out one of them and then try to write a mirror image of that arrangement from the other person's perspective. You can ask them or not. I would challenge you to first time around, don't ask them. Try to write down what you think the trade-offs are, what you think the arrangement is, and include a bunch of things. Think through in terms of, I ask a question. How many questions, am I allowed to question things? Am I allowed to experiment with things? So we only have a few minutes left. I want to start to wrap up here. Whoops, what did I do? I want to start to wrap up here, and I want to end with a thought. Here's the thought. This picture has a lot to do with everything we've been talking about. And what I mean by that is this. I have a robin egg, right? A blue robin egg. It hatches. What comes out? A robin. The robin lays an egg. What kind of an egg is it? a robin egg, not complicated, right? We could go on forever on this pattern. I take the robin egg out of the nest and I put a chicken egg in there. That chicken egg, if it's fertilized and everything, conditions are right, what comes out? A chicken, yes. That chicken lays an egg. What is it? It's a chicken egg, right? And then we can go around and around and around forever. Then I take out the chicken and I put a robin back in, a mother robin. She lays an egg. What kind of an egg is it? The point is this. The point is this. Which came first? I don't care. In the world of emotional intelligence, this loop, this model is incredibly powerful. And I've used it, hinted at it, made suggestions around it many times through what we've been talking about. But thoughts lead to feelings, lead to actions, lead to results, lead to thoughts, lead to feelings, lead to actions, lead to results, lead to thoughts, lead to feelings. Which one do I change if I want to affect my emotional state? Which one do I change if I want to try to affect someone else's emotional state? The reality is, you and I are much better at affecting thoughts or actions than we are at affecting feelings or results. So the easiest way to jump into the pattern, chicken, chicken egg, robin, robin egg, right? The easiest way to jump into the pattern is either in our thoughts or in our actions. I'll give you a simple example. Sit differently than you are right now. I don't care how you're sitting right now. Change the way you're sitting. Change the way you're sitting. Change what you're doing with your arms. Change what you're doing with your facial expression. Change what you're doing with your eyes. Give me the look that you give people when you are focused. Give me the look you would give somebody when you are confident off the charts. What's the look you give people when your confidence is off the charts? That's in the action section, right? How do you breathe when your confidence is very high? Here's my challenge for you on this little picture, and I could spend a day with you on this picture alone. Pick one emotion. Put it on my little chart, change it from the engagement index to the confidence index, or the focused index, or the not letting things distract you index, or the I'm paying attention and I care what you're telling me index. Pick any one emotional state and put it on this chart, 0 to 100%, 0 to 10. Just give yourself a score and then say, wait a second, what thoughts would help me move up in that really quickly? What thoughts would be like the salt for me? What actions would be like this? See, thoughts, the simple one with thoughts is questions, 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 questions. If I wanted to pay more attention right now, what would I do? Questions guide our thoughts, don't they? Questions guide our thoughts. Mother Teresa had a great quote. She said, some people come into our life as blessings and some people come into our life as lessons. I love that quote when it comes to EQ, because I love to sit there in a conversation with someone, like my friend in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, that said, Jonathan, if you knew what you were doing, I love to ask myself the simple question. Maybe this person is both a blessing and a lesson right now. What's the lesson for me right now? And one question can radically shift my emotional state. Here's my challenge for you to wrap up. Where do you go from here? Did I get you thinking enough that you say this is a topic worth trying to do something around? In the PDF that I gave you the download, I gave you a bunch of different things to do to take your EQ up a notch. Will you pick one and start working on it? I had the chance to spend a couple days with Michelle Akers. She was voted the #1 female soccer player of the 20th century. Mia Hamm was #2. Michelle played with Mia on the World Cup in 91 and 99 and the Olympic gold team in 96. And Michelle told me a lot of things, but one of them was this. She said, don't get bored doing the things that lead to greatness. Don't get bored doing the things that lead to greatness. Your EQ is already okay. I'm guessing it's not horrible, but there are some simple things you could do that would get it closer to greatness. Where do you go from here? Thank you so much for the chance to work with you today. Thanks for the chance to serve you. Have a great day.